Hello, and welcome to Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I'm going to read to you from Melody of Evil by N.L. Holmes. Chapter 1. Neferet and Ben-Arib were sitting at a little table in the salon, preparing to eat, when Lord Thomas entered. "He's early," Neferet observed. Of late, the master of the house rarely left his office at the Double House before sundown, and thus it was rare when his wife and her partner shared lunch with him. Thomas was tall, slim, and strikingly handsome, even though he was nearing 60, aristocratic to the marrow. He exchanged courteous greetings with the two young women while a servant washed his feet and offered him a perfumed towel to refresh his hands and face. At last he seated himself with a weary sigh, and a kitchen girl brought him a platter of sauced endives to start the meal. After he'd eaten a few mouthfuls, he said, "My dear, would you have any objection if I held a little party for Mut Emwia? It's been some months since she took up her new duties as chief of the musicians of the Hidden One, and I promised her a gesture of congratulations." "Not at all," Neferet answered cheerfully. "Mama says she's doing a splendid job, and even the men respect her." Thomas's eldest daughter had taken over the duties her mother had once held at the great temple of Amen-Ra. Lady Apony, a formidable Weret kenner, had been murdered, and her husband had never really gotten over it. Rich and good-looking as Thomas was, he'd been such a target of feminine designs in his widowhood that he had taken Neferet in a white marriage to remove himself from the list of eligible, and the relationship conveniently gave cover to her own affection for Ben-Arib, her fellow physician. "You won't have to do anything," he assured them. "I'll tell the steward to arrange for whatever will be needed, but I hope you and your family will be able to attend." Excitement sparking in her middle, Neferet exchanged a glance with Ben-Arib. "Ooh, it's been forever since anybody had a party. I can't wait. Only let us do something. We can find musicians, I'm sure." Thomas looked pleased. "That's very kind of you, Neferet. Dear Mut Emwia will be very grateful. I'll tell her you especially wanted to be part of it." "We know a florist too, Lord Thomas," said Ben-Arib shyly. "We could arrange for flowers." "I appreciate this, both of you. It will be a lot of work." In his cool, enigmatic way, he looked moved, his hooded black eyes softening. "Well, of course. That's what family is for." In fact, Neferet and Ben-Arib had found the murderer of a certain florist's father not much more than a year before. Neferet had a suspicion he would be more than willing to help them out with party flowers, even though he was attached to the Ipet Isut. But then, so was Lady Mut Emwia, all the more appropriate. "I'll have a guest list for you soon," Thomas promised. "I'm thinking the last day of the month should be propitious. The weather shouldn't be too hot yet." The women excused themselves as soon as they had finished their dinner, and Brute the Mastiff rose from his watchful place at Nefert's feet. The two women and the dog hurried off excitedly into the garden to plan, leaving Lord Thomas at table. "This will be fun. Papa has said Lord Thomas used to entertain all the time when Lady Apony was alive, but he hasn't had a party in years, certainly not since I, have been married to him." Neferet snickered and squeezed Ben-Arib's hand. "I guess we can't order flowers until we have the number of guests, though. The florist will need to make wreaths." "But we could ask your mother about musicians. She probably knows all kinds of musical people." Neferet nodded. "Let's see if she's home. We have time before we need to get back to the dispensary." "Should we take the children with us, then?" The two young women had adopted the orphaned brood of a murdered goldsmith whose widow had disappeared. "No need. I'll just tell nurse to take them on to the dispensary when they've eaten." Neferet turned toward the rear part of the house, where the children's nursery lay. "What about Mut-Toy?" Ben-Arib asked in an undertone behind her. "Ah, yes. Our little apprentice who thinks she's a grown-up at 14. She can come with us, I guess. They would never hear the end of it if they left her behind." The two young women made their way into the spacious apartments designed for the 6 youngsters, but they were conspicuously silent. Toys lay scattered around the gypsum floor of their salon, along with the remains of a messily consumed meal. The glaring rays of noontime sun shot mote-laden through the empty room from its high windows. From outside in the service court came screeching and whooping. Muttoy's imperious voice called out instructions for whatever game they were playing. It warmed Neferet inside to hear the children enjoying a happy, normal moment. Their earlier years had been difficult. At the two women's appearance, the children broke off their game and came flocking to them, chattering and tugging at their skirts. Even Baki, the baby, still not steady on his feet, tottered over and lifted his arms to be picked up. Hume and Muttoy, the two oldest, trailed after the others more sedately. Hume, a slight, solemn 13-year-old boy, was apprenticed to a goldsmith. Muttoy was nominally apprentice of Neferet, but she'd made it clear she had no intention of becoming a village healer, let alone a literate and highly trained Sunet like her teachers. Tall and skinny, and far from looking like an adult she fancied herself, Muttoy was Muttoy. From the other side of the gaggle of young ones, their nurse smiled and waved. What a gem, Neferet thought. The Great One sent her to us. The woman had wet nursed the youngest two and still supplied Baki with milk, even though Tiri had been, unwillingly, weaned. But Nurse was also an ever-flowing river of patience and energy, who herded the unruly brood to and from the dispensary every morning and supervised them, while Neferet and Benarib treated their patients. Neferet was embarrassed to admit she couldn't remember the girl's name. Ibet would know it. For Neferet she was simply Nurse, as if that were her inmost nature, her very ka. We have to drop in on Mama to ask her about something before we go back to the clinic, Neferet called out over the little ones' heads. You can take the children back whenever you're ready, and we'll join you. As Neferet could have predicted, Muttoy opened her mouth to protest. Come with us. Hume, you can go straight to Inhapi's whenever the others leave. Benarib hoisted Baki into her arms and kissed him noisily until he squealed for joy, while Neferet set Tiri on her hip. Have you been a good girl? She teased. Because you're 4 now, and big girls have to behave. I'm good, Tiri assured her earnestly. Baki's real bad. The baby stared back as if he couldn't believe his ears. The adults laughed, while Quen and Shuroy, the middle boys, honked with hilarity. All right, everyone, Neferet said. Good children line up behind Nurse and prepare to march. Bad children have to stay here. Ibet and I need to do some homework, and Muttoy. They set down the little ones, and, with their apprentice hot on their heels, the two Sunets set off through the garden. Brute glided like a massive brown shadow at their side. Behind them, all the children decided they were good and jostled each other to get in line. The 3 young women were damp with perspiration by the time they reached the red gate of Neferet's beloved childhood home, even though it wasn't distant. Her heart melted every time she entered that walled garden, generously planted with flowers and fruiting trees. How many happy hours she and her brothers and sisters had passed in play along the gravel walks and in the branches of the old sycamore figs, and even splashing in the rectangular fish pond, sending the carp and bulti fleeing in terror and the water lilies rocking. There had never been rules about preserving the plantings nor drawing on the wall. When Neferet heard stories about Benarib's lonely and regimented childhood, she thanked all of the gods that her own had been so free and full of love. Yuti, the gatekeeper, greeted them with a grin, seconded by old Ah, who supervised Yuti from the shade of the outdoor shrine. Your parents are eating, Lady Neferet. The 3 made their way up a walk strewn with the toys of grandchildren to the door of the big, comfortable old house. In the doorway, they almost ran into Grandfather, who was dressed in his snowiest linen and wearing a fancy wig. Neferet, my girl, Benarib, Muttoy, how nice to see you. Forgive to her country house this afternoon, and I'm probably late. He winked at the young woman and hustled past. Amused, Neferet watched his broad figure toddling away down the path. I bet Mariette Armand's cook is going with them, she said with a snort of laughter. They entered the shadowy cool of the vestibule, Brute's claws clicking tinnily on the stone flooring. Did you forget something, Father? Papa called from the salon. No, it's us. Neferet burst into the salon. Parents were face to face at a folding table, finishing their meal with a bowl of dried figs. Did you think we were Grandfather's toenails going click, click, click? She pulled up a stool, and the others did the same. Mamma reached out to fondle Brute's ears and slipped him a piece of fat from her plate. Papa laughed, exposing the gap between his front teeth. I didn't hear any clicks, just the door opening. What earns us the pleasure of this visit, ladies? Lord Thomas told us just now that he's going to hold a party for Lady Mut Weir, for her new post as Weret Kenner. How lovely, Mamma cried. She deserves it. And you can see how hard Thomas is trying to be a better father, to show his appreciation of his children more openly. He's a good man, Papa said, and he deserves a celebration too. He spent a lifetime working hard in the good God's service, and I sometimes think he only sees his shortcomings, not his accomplishments. We told him we'd find musicians and flowers. Penboy will help us with the flowers, we're sure, Benarib said. I should think. He surely remembers that you found his father's killer. Papa had helped the young woman track down the elder florist's murderer. We thought you could help us find a troupe of musicians, Mamma. I think I can. In fact, there are 2 young dancers who serve part-time in the temple, and I understand that their family are all musicians and singers. I feel sure they'd like an extra assignment. When is the party to be held? The end of the month. I suppose he means this month. Pa en Kunsu. She shot a glance at Benarib, who nodded. Only 3 weeks away. I'll talk to them as soon as I see them. I'm in service again right